This is Euronews Tonight. Here are your top stories. Putting on a united front, EU foreign ministers meet to try to coordinate a plan against Russian aggression. Brussels insists that Moscow will face massive consequences if it attacks Ukraine. Meanwhile, NATO puts extra forces on standby and sends ships and jets eastwards. NATO Chief Stoltenberg calls the measures proportionate, but Russia says it is a provocation. In Germany, a lone gunman is killed after shooting and wounding several people at a university in Heidelberg.
And Tennis Australia faces fresh criticism for banning shows of support for absent player Peng Shuai. We'll have the latest from the Australian Open.
I'm Helena Humphrey. It is good to have you with us. A united EU front in the face of rising tensions between Russia and Ukraine. That is the central topic of discussion for EU foreign ministers meeting in Brussels. Well, the EU has reiterated its full support for Ukraine in the face of Russia's continuing military build-up along its eastern borders. Moscow has repeatedly denied it has plans to invade Ukraine. But the EU's foreign affairs chief says that the troop movement and what he called Russian rhetoric bring back dark memories.
The Russian military build-up in and around Ukraine and Russia's attempts to recreate dividing lines on our continent undermine the core foundations and principles on which European security is built and bring back dark memories of spheres of influence which don't belong to the 21st century. We reaffirm our full and unquestionable support to Ukraine and that any military aggression against Ukraine will have serious consequences and massive costs for the perpetrator.
Well, members from the NATO Defence Alliance are boosting their presence across the region amid the heightened tensions. Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg gave details of the deployments a short time ago.
For instance, Denmark is sending a frigate to the Baltic Sea and will deploy more jets to Lithuania as part of our Baltic air policing mission. France has expressed its readiness to send troops to Romania under NATO command. The Netherlands is sending fighter aircraft to Bulgaria for air policing and is putting units on standby for a NATO response force. Spain is sending ships to join NATO naval forces in the Black Sea and the Mediterranean and considering sending jets to Bulgaria. And the United States, for the first time in decades, put a carrier strike group under NATO command. We are considering to further enhance our presence in the eastern part of the alliance. This could include the deployment of additional NATO battle groups. These deployments are proportionate and in line with our international commitments.
Well, the EU has proposed offering more support to Ukraine. The Commission President Ursula von der Leyen unveiled a number of new funding measures.
The Commission proposes a new emergency macrofinancial assistance package of 1.2 billion euros. This package will help Ukraine now to address its financing needs due to the conflict. We count on the Council and the European Parliament to adopt this emergency macrofinancial assistance as soon as possible.
Well, in Brussels tonight, our correspondent Shona Murray joins us. Welcome to you, Shona. We know that foreign ministers from the European Union have been meeting there in Brussels. Are they any closer on a united response?
Well, certainly they are. I mean, there's really what we've seen today as a result of that meeting between EU27 and Anthony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, was that there is a bit of more of a united front but there is no clarity yet on what sanctions will look like when it comes to, and if it comes to, Russia invading Ukraine. Now, we know that last week there were some jitters about the unity of the US and European Union position, considering some comments from Emmanuel Macron on the Wednesday, and concerns, I suppose, about the EU being sidelined. But certainly there is a much more of a strong confrontational approach when it comes to Russia. We've seen the conclusions. We heard there from Joseph Borrell, the EU's foreign policy chief, saying that there will be massive economic consequences for Russia, the likes of which have never been before, if it does engage in any sort of incursion against Ukraine. But we don't know what they look like yet, because they are being worked on from a technical point of view. And then, as we've spoken about before, the implications of sanctions are different for each member state. It's one thing sanctioning a military general who decides to put troops or military equipment across the border in Ukraine. It's a different thing sanctioning an oligarch who has millions of euros invested in somewhere like Cyprus. So that's still being worked out.
On top of that, Shona, we've also heard from the NATO chief about NATO troop deployment. What more can you tell us about that?
That's right, and we heard from Jens Stoltenberg, the head of NATO, who gave a press conference just a short while ago, who talked about, for the first time, for example, in decades, the US giving a carrier and strike group under NATO control. Other countries like Denmark, France, considering to sending troops to Romania. The Dutch are sending fighter jets to Bulgaria, all trying to create a bulwark against Europe in the case of there being some sort of invasion. So we see very much a defensive front from a NATO point of view, and a much more unified approach from a US and EU point of view.
Shona Murray tonight in Brussels. Shona, as ever, thanks for your reporting. Well, Russia has reacted, saying that the US and NATO are escalating tensions and driving hysteria. A spokesman for President Putin says that the deployment of forces and military hardware, as well as the spreading of misinformation, is ratcheting up the temperature. He said Ukraine is building up a huge number of troops in the east of the country, saying it was the one preparing for an offensive operation. So let's go straight now to our Russia analyst, Galina Polanskaya, who is standing by for us. Good to see you, Galina. We know that NATO is sending more vessels, more planes now to Ukraine. We've heard from Stoltenberg that he terms it as proportionate. The Kremlin has reacted, saying that it's a provocation. So can we expect the Kremlin to react? And if so, how?
Hello. Well, actually, it is very hard to predict the Kremlin's next move right now. It insists that it is waiting for the written response from the United States, and we have heard those harsh statements from Vladimir Putin's spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, who accused NATO and the US of escalating tensions around Ukraine by moving its forces to its east flank. And Mr. Peskov also said, I quote, that those movements of NATO near Russian borders cannot be ignored by the military. But what would be the next move? It is hard to say at this particular stage. What we know is that Russian forces are staying at the Ukrainian border. We know that the next biggest stage of Russia-Belarus drills will start very soon in February. And we also know that in February, the Russian State's Duma Council will decide on the proposal to recognize the self-proclaimed republics on the east of Ukraine. This was the idea of the Communist Party. Meanwhile, the Kremlin says that the tensions are escalating and that it is not Russia to blame for that.
Galina, we know that the US Secretary of State Blinken has been talking to EU foreign ministers about the content of that written reply to Russia that they have now committed to. Do we know what diplomatically they could offer to Russia to then see Russian troops walk back?
Well, Russia keeps on saying that everything actually will depend on what is written in this reply from the United States to its security demands, and we already know exactly what will not be written there. And Russia knows that it will not get a yes on its principal, fundamental, as it says, demands. It wants promises, guarantees that Ukraine or any other ex-Soviet state, Georgia, for example, will become a part of NATO, that NATO stops expansion eastwards and goes back to its borders of 1997. And we know that Russia knows that it is not possible. So what would be the next move? And it is clearly that the diplomatic path seems to be really vague, even though there are still hopes that diplomacy will not be finished and that there will be a meeting between Mr. Lavrov and Mr. Blinken, and maybe even the meeting talks between the presidents, as the Kremlin said, that if they are needed, this is still an option. We also know that Russia says that it does not want to attack, but that Joe Biden said that Russia will have to move in and ordered relatives or families of the diplomats, workers in Ukraine to leave the country.
All right, looking at all the chess pieces for us, our Russia analyst Galina Polanskaya. Galina, as ever, good to talk to you. A lone gunman who opened fire in a lecture hall at Heidelberg University in southwest Germany has injured 4 people, some of them seriously. The shooter who was killed is reported to have been a student. Investigators say they haven't uncovered a political or religious motive for the attack. From Berlin, Kate Brady sent the latest.
Authorities here in Germany have now confirmed that 1 person has been killed and another 3 injured earlier today after a gunman opened fire in a lecture theatre at the University of Heidelberg in southwestern Germany. Now, authorities say the gunman appears to have indeed acted alone when he entered the lecture hall with a long-barrelled weapon. Police have also confirmed that the suspected perpetrator was found dead soon after that shooting. One German news agency is also reporting that he actually turned the gun on himself, but more details are expected to be confirmed by police later this evening. In the meantime, local authorities have said there appears to be no further danger to the public, and the motive of the suspected perpetrator is still unclear. Kate Brady, Euronews, Berlin.
The United Arab Emirates intercepted 2 ballistic missiles over Abu Dhabi, the second attack on the capital in a week. The strikes have been claimed by Yemen's Houthi rebels. A spokesman warned the UAE that it would continue to be a target as long as attacks on the Yemeni people continue. It comes a week after Houthis claimed another attack on Abu Dhabi that killed 3 people and wounded 6. Supporters of Julian Assange welcomed the decision by a London court to allow the WikiLeaks founder to appeal a decision for extradition to the US, where he could face a lifetime in prison. The ruling means Assange can ask the UK's highest court for a hearing, stalling any extradition for now. Washington wants to put Assange on trial in connection with the publication of hundreds of thousands of military files relating to the US-led wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Former Pope Benedict XVI has admitted being in a meeting when the transfer of a paedophile priest to his then diocese in 1980 was being discussed. The retired Pope blamed an editorial error for previously denying being at the meeting. Benedict, who was the Archbishop of Munich between 1977 and 1982, has been criticised for his handling of 4 cases during that time. Benedict denies any wrongdoing. Well, the organisers of the Australian Open at tennis are facing fresh criticism for clamping down on banners and T-shirts that display support for the Chinese player Peng Shuai. And Matthew in the Cube has the latest now.
Helena, as you say, Tennis Australia once again in the spotlight, and once again it's not the action on the court that has been drawing the attention. Spectators and activists attending the tournament have been banned from wearing T-shirts and carrying banners showing their support for the absent Chinese player Peng Shuai. Video on Sunday emerged showing security officials stopping people from entering the venue whilst they were wearing T-shirts which showed Peng's face on the front and on the back of the T-shirt the words "Where is Peng Shuai?" The Chinese government has been accused of silencing the female tennis player after last year she made a sexual assault allegation against a close ally of President Xi Jinping. Since then, Peng Shuai has reappeared, but there are still concerns for her well-being, and organisations like the Women's Tennis Association have said that they will refuse to play tournaments in China this year as a result. Well, now there's fresh criticism to Tennis Australia over this latest stance on the ban of support. You have people like Martina Navratilova, a former female world #1 and a 3-time Australian Open champion, saying on Twitter that the stance by Tennis Australia was pathetic. Another player, the men's seeded doubles athlete Nicolas Mahut, also said on Twitter that he noted that some of the sponsors at the Australian Open were Chinese distilleries. He said on Twitter that it showed a lack of courage from Tennis Australia and said that he was beyond disappointed. Now, the authorities initially released a statement saying that displays of support for Peng Shuai broke their rules on political messaging. But they have since responded to the backlash, saying that they understand people have a lot of strong views on a wide range of issues. They say Peng Shuai's safety is one of their primary concerns and that they are continuing to work with the international tennis community to ensure her well-being. But Helena, a number of human rights activists have said and been calling on other major tennis players at the Australian Open to also voice their criticism of the authorities and also express concern about the well-being of Peng Shuai.
Matthew, tracking that story for us from the Cube, thank you so much. Well, the last 16 of the Australian Tennis Open has come to an end, and it proved a real struggle for some of the top players. Temperatures of 32 degrees Celsius recorded in the Rod Laver Arena for Alizé Cornet's victory over two-time Grand Slam winner Simona Halep. There were hard-fought wins for Swiatek and Danielle Collins as well. Now, though, the quarterfinals await, and to take us through the action and what is to come, we're joined in the studio by our sports editor, Andy Rubini. Good to see you, Andy. To begin with, I mean, these last 16 ties, they've proved really tough because we've got those scorching conditions, some stiff competitions. So which matches really stood out for you?
Well, it has to be Alizé Cornet, with the French tennis player defying the odds to beat Simona Halep, a two-time Grand Slam winner, in 3 sets. It's a fairy tale run, and when you speak of fairy tale runs in the world of sport, you often think of young sensations, the like of Ostapenko in France, Raducanu at the US Open. But Alizé Cornet is 32 years of age, and she shows that determination is key and anything is possible. Just to put things into perspective, this result sees her reach a major quarterfinal for the first time in 63 attempts. Now, the World 61 eventually won through 6-4, 3-6, 6-4, and will next lock horns with Danielle Collins, who came from behind to beat Mertens in 3 sets.
Well, you mentioned a fairy tale. Talking about a bit of a nightmare now, I think it's fair to say that Daniil Medvedev, who is the highest seeded tennis star in Djokovic's absence, I mean, he didn't have a great day, did he? He won, but he didn't seem too happy about the whole affair.
No, and I was in two minds. First of all, watching the game, I mean, he did say that this was his unluckiest day ever, which is disrespectful towards his opponent. It's almost like you're saying that you're the luckiest man to still be in this game with me, Daniil Medvedev. That's how I took it, because he was getting frustrated that his opponent was saving so many break points. He also said that this game was so boring, which is atrocious, let's be honest. A lot of ranting towards the umpire. But then he won the game, and during his press conference did apologise to his opponent, said that he needed also to work on himself. He does have a lot of temper. We've been asking for these strong personalities to get back in this world of tennis. We haven't had them for so long, and now that they're here, I mean, you know, you just have to take it. But he did apologise in the end, and I think he's a tremendous player. Almost reminds me of Novak Djokovic, so he could go all the way this year.
Talking about going all the way, quarterfinals fast approaching. Who should we be watching closely?
Daniil Medvedev for sure, and you also have Rafael Nadal probably en route to win a 21st Grand Slam. He'll be up against Denis Shapovalov, the young Canadian who beats Alexander Zverev. So obviously one of the games to watch, but you also have Alizé Cornet against Danielle Collins, and obviously the favourite in the women's draw, Ashley Barty, there against Jessica Pegula of the United States.
All right, well, watching it all for us as ever, our sports editor, Andy Rubini. Thanks so much, Andy. Good to talk to you. Award season is underway, and Scandinavian films are creating a buzz in Los Angeles. The Oscars has shortlisted 4 Nordic films in its international film category, and Heather Donald has been taking a look at them.
Europe is in a strong position at the Oscars this year, as it has 10 contenders on the shortlist for the international feature film category, and 4 of them are Scandinavian. The Icelandic feature Lamb is one of 2021's revelations. It stars Noomi Rapace, the heroine from the Millennium Trilogy, as the lead. It's a film that combines a diversity of genres, including fantasy and mystery. As well as featuring a rather special sheep, the film also demonstrates the breadth of European cinematic talent.
European cinema is about the multitude of different voices coming together and being shared between countries without trying to do the same thing. I grew up looking at French, Polish, Italian movies, Danish movies, living in Norway. This is a system that's both supported politically, and we mustn't lose that. But it's also about us filmmakers sustaining local films in our countries, being specific about language, character.
Tria's film, The Worst Person in the World, was shot in Oslo and co-produced by 3 Scandinavian countries as well as France. The film has won numerous awards around the world, including the Palme d'Or and Best International Feature at the Gotham Independent Film Awards. It is being released in most European countries. Juho Kuosmanen's film has also found international acclaim. It's the story of a Finnish woman and a Russian man who meet on a train and seemingly have nothing in common.
They feel so disconnected, and they have this, they feel that they are so different because of their social differences, their social class, their nationality, and their level of education or whatever. But in the end, they are not exactly that much different. They are pretty much the same.
The latest Scandinavian film to cross borders is the Danish animated documentary Flee, about a young Afghan migrant. The 5 films nominated from the shortlist for the Best International Feature Oscar will be announced on February the 8th. Heather Donald, Euronews.
And we leave you with a no comment from Madrid, where thousands of farmers have protested against government, environment and economic policies that they say are damaging rural communities. Thanks for watching Euronews Tonight.